Hi friends, I'm so excited to share my first digital pattern. I've been wanting to share some of my designs for a while now and finally getting around to doing so. If you don't know about me, my name is Joanne. I'm a sustainable fashion designer focusing on using vintage textiles. I have a small business where I sell my creations and now patterns. So the pattern is called the Charlie Romper. It's this cute little romper that buttons up and has front pockets. I would say it's for an advanced beginner to intermediate level sewer, but I break it down so you can follow along. So if you have determination, I believe you can make it too. The pattern is linked below if you choose to follow along, so let's just jump right in. This pattern works well with mid to heavier fabrics such as twill, corduroy, velvet, or wool. I went with this vintage dead stock fabric. It feels like a synthetic wool. I thought the colors and the weight would work well with this project. Some other supplies you need are a size 14 needle. This works well with mid-weight fabric, matching thread, 5 buttons in size 5/8 to 3/4. I tried both and I prefer the smaller one, and awl to mark the darts and pockets, erasable marking pens, and interfacing that matches the weight of the fabric or close to it. When cutting out, don't forget to mark the darts, pocket placements, and notches. If you don't have a hole punch, you could punch a hole with your awl so you can mark the dots. Iron on all interfacing pieces to the facing and plackets, then overlock back side seam and inseam, back neck facing bottom and side seam, front crotch seam and inseam, placket edges, and front neck facing bottom and side seam. Starting with the pockets, pre-stitch 1/16 inch shy of the seam allowance, clip curves, and then iron. This gives a guideline when ironing and clipping so you don't clip too far. Turn under the pre-stitched line so you can't see it on the face. Hem pocket by ironing in 3/8 of an inch, then 7/8, and then edge stitching. Pin pockets to body using the dots as a guide. Dots should be just inside pocket edges. Edge stitch on by starting and ending with reinforcement triangles. Totally optional, but helps to reinforce those edges. Otherwise, just back tack on and sew. After sewing the pockets, I like to pull the threads to the back and tying them in a couple knots so it's super clean on the face of the fabric. Now for the front darts. I take my awl and poke through where it's marked on the fabric. Turn to the back side and mark the triangle by lining up the notches, then marking the end of the triangle 3/4 of an inch below the hole from the awl. Make sure the hole is in the meat of the triangle and it's not visible to the face of the body. Sew the triangle and chain off around an inch tail, then back tacking it onto the meat of the dart. Once the front darts are in, you can now overlock the side seam. For the double-ended dart in the back, I'm going to poke through the markings like I did with the front and mark these points on the back side. Mark midpoint 1/2 inch away from the fold and centering a 1 inch line so there's 1/2 inch above and below the midpoint, then mark 3/4 inch above and below each endpoints. Connect each point, making the shape of a double-ended dart. Sew dart by following the line starting 1/2 inch above the midpoint line, sewing down and chaining off and back tacking on the meat of the dart. Flip the piece around to sew the other end of the dart starting 1/2 inch above the midpoint so you're overlapping the previous stitch around an inch, and sew the rest of the dart. Repeat the process to the other back piece. Now you can press the back darts towards the center back and the front darts down. Next up is the all-in-one facing. Start by sewing the center back seam and stopping around where the double-ended darts end. Then shoulder seams and press open. For the facings, connect the center front placket to the front neck facing using the notch as a guide to stop, and press this seam away from center front. Then sew facing shoulder seams and press open. Now we are going to connect the neck facing to the body by sewing around the neck, trimming off 1/8 of an inch, then clipping the curves. Then understitch by edge stitching with the seam allowance towards the facing. Repeat this process to the armholes, but when understitching, sew up each side of the armhole until you can. There will be a small portion of the armhole where it's not understitched, but that's okay. To turn this inside out, use the placket as a rope to grab through the shoulder tunnel. I find that this makes it easy to pull through. Press the neck and armholes in place. You could also add a label at this time too. Next, we need to close up the center front placket by sewing down the front edge and stopping where the placket meets the crotch seam. Make sure to back tack here. I find it useful to draw these lines in place so you know exactly where to pivot and stop. Trim the top corner, bottom corner, and crotch seam corner, but only on the body and not the placket. Turn inside out and press. Sew inseams by matching up the front and back leg. Then close up the center back seam by sewing on the previous stitch around an inch and sewing around to the crotch seam. Then stop exactly at the point where the placket meets the crotch seam and back tack. Make sure to pull away some of the placket seams so you don't accidentally sew through them. Close up the side seams by lining up the armhole facings and sewing all the way down. To finish the leg opening, I clean finish first by edge stitching under a quarter, then pressing up an inch. Then I blind hem by hand. You could finish however you like. There is an 1.25 inch space to work with. Add buttons according to the size of your button of your choosing. I always do a couple test runs on the same fabric as the garment. Then use the pattern as a guide to know where to place the holes, mark, and sew. Cut open the buttonholes and add buttons to the other side. The last thing you want to do is tack down all the facings and placket. For the center front placket, edge stitch the bottom by sewing through all layers. Make sure you're sewing only on the plackets and the front body and avoiding the back. Then machine or hand tack armhole facings and spacing at center back. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And if you end up making this romper, please tag me. I'd love to see your creations. Also, say hello to me on my Instagram and TikTok if you don't already follow me there. And if you want to see more tutorials, thrift flips, and other upcycle ideas, please comment below. I'd love to share more. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Every opportunity I'm taking just so I don't let you